Loving the Rhythm but Not the Blues by Naomi Gray. My mother, my two older siblings and I moved to Nottingham when I was 5, back in 1987. It was a fresh start for us after living within the military barracks in Aldershot as my dad was in the army. My mum loves music and would dig into her playlist and play her old records, especially on the weekends. In 1988, a new pirate radio station called Heatwave Radio was on the scene.
Heatwave, you are the sound for the world.
It was created by prominent black musical figures in the city and was to be enjoyed by the black community and, to be honest, everyone who respected our culture. It quickly gained a large following and would be on rotation with various DJs 24/7, including two of my uncles who had shows on there. Every day, especially the weekends, we would listen to the sweet sounds of reggae, dance, R&B, hip-hop and much more. No matter if I was at home or staying with my aunt or grandparents, Heatwave radio station would be blasting through the speakers.
I'm ready for your loving. I'm ready for your loving, girl.
Yes, that's the title of the track, coming from the man like Al Campbell, rotating on the Black Scorpio Records label. Doing niceness on this turntable for all you who desire these styles here. Daddy Crucial has got them enough.
People would call in and make requests or send in a shout out to big up their family and friends or even enter singing competitions, including my mum and her friends who cannot sing at all. It was a community-centred station with hot topics every day in a week, somewhere to go, be involved and share thoughts, debate on current topics or just simply tell someone, I love you. No subject was off limits. If it was important or felt necessary, they would talk about it and air it respectfully. There were no barriers. Growing up, there were no limitations, and as a listener, it felt like there was no rules and regulations for black radio stations. But that was my childhood, and this was, my gosh, dare I say it, 33 years ago. In my late teens and early 20s, me and my friends would listen to Heatwave Radio, Radio 1, 1Extra, Capital, and various pirate stations from the UK. One thing I noticed when listening to commercial stations is that the language is very different. Not that pirates were speaking a different language, but the tone was just different. You know, the way topics are discussed. Commercial and BBC stations can be at times very restrictive, tamed, or would dance around a subject and not want to sound too harsh, which is a very British trait. 1Extra, for example, would push boundaries depending on the time, type of music being played, or the presenter. However, there was still a cut-off point as it's the BBC at the end of the day. This year, we have had many major heart-wrenching headlines concerning the Black Lives Matter movement, and I found myself feeling hugely disappointed by the lack of depth in coverage by some of these stations, especially those whose remit is to cater to African and African Caribbean communities, and that the majority of their presenters are black too. It made me think that it is almost as though the presenters are only allowed to be 75% of themselves. Maybe that's why these presenters sound so much more free when they are speaking on their own platforms. If you have a regular radio show on a major platform whose licence primarily requires them to cater for the African and African Caribbean communities across the country, then shouldn't the content on it allow presenters to be their authentic self? So, for example, speaking of the BBC specifically, the institution is owned by us, the public, right? So why do I still not feel entirely represented? It reminds me of something Clara Amfo referred to when she said, you cannot enjoy the rhythm and ignore the blues. It is almost as though they allow our rhythms to make it through, but when it comes to our blues, these must be left at the door. Then I have to remind myself that although we all express ourselves differently, how much should I expect from an institution that perhaps doesn't see you for who you really are, a person whose life matters and is worth speaking up for? I guess this is the constant battle. Is this perhaps why Sideman's media space sounds so free? Freedom of speech, freedom of creativity, a place where he can truly be himself. We've also seen the progression of podcasters owning their masters outright. They have freedom of speech and listeners who respect and tune into them for who they are. Seems like this just may be the only way we can be free. These are just some of my thoughts from observation as I question why it may be necessary for Black presenters to make sure they have other side hustles on their own platforms. I recently started hosting my own show for Ferrity Radio, an independently run Black-owned station. This opportunity came to me by surprise. However, you know what they say about divine timing, right? Instead of me focusing on what I would like to hear from other Black music radio stations and presenters to say, I have a platform now to do so myself. What I love is that the founder Freestyle encourages me to be myself, as he always reminds me that that was the reason why he asked me to be on the show in the first place. Who I am on air is who I am in person. There is no filter. All presenters at Ferrity are encouraged to be authentically themselves. I hope it remains this way. Since starting the show, I have received several comments from people applauding me, and then some going on to say, what are your plans? Where do you see yourself? Will you move on to a bigger platform? At first it may seem like a compliment. However, I started to ask, what do these questions really mean? Why is Black media not fully respected? Why should the end goal be to work at a commercial or bigger non-Black owned platform? What happened to building Black-owned media platforms? Should I or will I consider one day working at a commercial platform? If I did, would they nurture my voice, or would it be another case of having to adhere to rules, regulations and restrictions that may attempt to strip away my Blackness? Will it be a case of letting me in for my rhythm, but not my blues?